Every day, hundreds of moving trucks leave America's biggest cities. Not for vacation. Not for temporary relocation. Forever. New York. Los Angeles. Chicago. San Francisco. Portland. These weren't just cities. They were symbols. Of opportunity. Of ambition. Of the immigrant dream and the promise that if you worked hard enough, you could build something. But something extraordinary is happening right now, and almost no one in power is talking about it. For the first time in modern American history, millions are leaving the country's biggest cities. Not slowly. Not temporarily. This is a mass movement, a national exodus, happening at a scale and speed we haven't seen since the Great Depression. And the silence around it is deafening. Not in political speeches. Not in government briefings. Not even in most economic reports. The story is buried in census data, moving company statistics, and real estate tracking reports that most people will never see. But the numbers tell a story that cannot be ignored. New data from 2023, 2024, and early 2025 reveals something that should concern every American, regardless of where they live or what they believe. The American city is no longer the center of opportunity. It's becoming the center of struggle. And millions of Americans are voting with their feet, making the hardest decision many will ever make, to leave behind everything they built and start over somewhere else. This is the silent exodus. And it's reshaping the future of the United States in ways most people haven't begun to understand. For the next minutes, we're going deep into the numbers, the psychology, and the consequences of the largest urban to suburban migration in modern American history. The numbers they don't want to talk about. Let's start with what the data actually says, not the headlines, not the political spin, but the raw numbers that paint a picture of historic change. According to 2023 and 2024 census migration data, the population losses in America's largest cities are staggering. New York City lost over 78,000 residents in 2024 alone. Not over a decade. In 1 year. Los Angeles lost nearly 55,000. Chicago lost roughly 39,000. San Francisco, once the crown jewel of American innovation, lost an estimated 26,000. These aren't statistical noise. These aren't minor adjustments. These are population outflows comparable to major historical events, cities losing the equivalent of entire small towns every single year. And this isn't pandemic flight that bounced back. This is sustained, accelerating departure that shows no signs of slowing. But the story isn't just about who's leaving. It's about where they're going. According to U.S. Census data, USPS address change tracking, and real estate migration reports, the destinations tell us everything we need to know about what Americans are searching for. Texas. Austin suburbs. Dallas-Fort Worth outskirts. San Antonio's growing fringe. Florida. Tampa suburbs. Orlando outskirts. The Sarasota region experiencing explosive growth. The Carolinas, both north and south, absorbing tens of thousands of former city dwellers. Tennessee, particularly the outskirts of Nashville and the Chattanooga region. Arizona suburbs spreading further into the desert. Large portions of Ohio, Indiana, and Pennsylvania seeing reverse migration for the first time in decades. Even smaller towns across the Midwest, places that were written off as dying just 10 years ago, are experiencing population growth and economic revival. But here's what the data reveals that most coverage misses. Americans aren't just moving. They are escaping. This is not about relocation for a job opportunity or a lifestyle upgrade. This is about retreat. About families making desperate calculations and concluding that the city they love, the city they invested years of their lives building a future in, no longer works for them. When you dig into the surveys, into the interviews with people who've left, the same phrases appear over and over. I couldn't afford it anymore. I didn't feel safe. I wanted my kids to have a better life. I don't recognize my city anymore. This is not a trend. This is a reckoning. The 5 triggers. Migration researchers studying this phenomenon have identified multiple factors driving urban exodus. But after analyzing the data, the testimonies, and the economic realities, 5 primary triggers emerge. I call this the 5-trigger exit model. And understanding these triggers is essential to understanding why this is happening now, at this scale, and why it's unlikely to reverse without massive structural change. Trigger 1, the cost of living explosion. In 2024, the median rent in America's major cities reached levels that previous generations would consider impossible. San Francisco, $3,000 per month for a median 1-bedroom. New York, $3,700. Los Angeles, $2,900. Boston, $3,300. Miami, $2,850. These aren't luxury apartments in premium neighborhoods. These are average rents across the entire metro area. Meanwhile, real wage growth since 2020 has been nearly flat. Inflation outpaced wage increases for 32 consecutive months between 2021 and 2024. The math is brutal and simple. Families are calculating their options and realizing they face an impossible choice. They can own a home outside the city, build equity, have space, and create stability. Or they can rent a small apartment in the city, build no wealth, and struggle to save. But they cannot do both. Not anymore. This is the first time in decades where urban living has become financially irrational for the average American family. Not difficult. Not challenging. Irrational. And when the math doesn't work, people leave. Trigger 2, safety and the psychology of fear. This part is sensitive, but honesty is essential. Urban crime patterns between 2023 and 2024 reveal a complex picture. Car theft in cities like Chicago, St. Louis, Seattle, and Washington, D.C. skyrocketed. Retail theft in San Francisco and Los Angeles reached levels that forced major chains to close stores and abandon entire neighborhoods. Violent crime statistics vary by city and by neighborhood, and overall crime rates are lower than peaks in the 1980s and 90s. But here's what matters more than statistics: perception and fear. Fear is rising. And fear, not actual crime rates, is one of the leading indicators of migration. When families no longer feel safe walking to a subway station at night, when they hear gunshots from their apartment, when they see visible signs of social breakdown in public spaces, they start researching other places to live. Safety isn't just about crime statistics. It's about the feeling of security that allows people to build lives, raise children, and invest in a community. When that feeling disappears, so do the people. Trigger 3, the school quality crisis. For families with children, schools are often the deciding factor. And in many major cities, the school systems are struggling in ways that directly impact family decisions. Severe staffing shortages. Resource gaps widening between wealthy and poor districts. Massive learning loss from pandemic school closures that has never been recovered. Lower standardized test scores. Safety concerns inside school buildings. Meanwhile, suburban and rural schools often offer smaller class sizes, higher parental involvement, more stable staffing, better facilities, and higher perceived safety. Parents aren't moving for luxury. They're not chasing elite private schools. They're moving because they look at their local public school and conclude their children deserve better. And they're willing to uproot their entire lives to provide it. When a parent says, "I'm leaving for my kids," that's not a decision made lightly. That's a decision made after months of agonizing calculation. And once that decision is made, nothing will stop them. Trigger 4, remote work broke the geographic prison. In 2019, fewer than 6% of Americans worked remotely full-time. It was considered a rare perk, something only certain tech companies or freelancers could do. By 2024, estimates show 26 to 29% of skilled workers remain remote or hybrid. That's not a small shift. That's a fundamental restructuring of how work happens in America. And remote work destroyed the biggest reason people tolerated expensive, crowded, stressful city life, the commute to a high-paying job. Suddenly, Americans started asking a question that had never made sense before. Why am I paying $3,000 a month to sit in a small apartment when I can buy a house with a yard for the same monthly cost 2 hours away? When you remove the requirement to be physically present in an office, you remove the city's primary bargaining power. Workers gained freedom. Cities lost leverage. And millions of workers made the rational choice. The geography of opportunity fundamentally changed. And it's never going back. Trigger 5, the collapse of daily urban quality of life. But perhaps the most underestimated trigger is the simplest one. For millions of Americans, city life stopped being rewarding and started being exhausting. Commutes got worse, not better. Public transit became less reliable, more crowded, and in many cities, less safe. Homelessness increased visibly in ways that changed the character of public spaces. Parks, plazas, and sidewalks that used to be communal gathering spaces became scenes of visible social breakdown. Services declined as tax bases shrank. Streets went unrepaired. Trash collection became inconsistent. The small conveniences that made dense urban living tolerable started disappearing. People don't leave cities because of one bad day or one frustrating experience. They leave because the accumulation of daily struggles becomes unbearable. When getting through a normal day requires navigating obstacle after obstacle, when the mental load of urban life exceeds the benefits, people start looking for the exit. Cities used to offer a trade-off. Yes, it's expensive and crowded, but you get culture, opportunity, energy, and convenience. When the costs rise and the benefits decline, that trade-off collapses. And once it collapses, people leave. The emotional psychology of leaving. But the data and the economic triggers only tell part of the story. Because leaving a city isn't just a financial calculation. It's an emotional rupture. People don't leave cities lightly. They leave after years of building lives, careers, friendships, and identities tied to a place. They leave after trying everything they can to make it work. They leave reluctantly, painfully, and often with deep grief. Interviews and surveys with people who've left major cities reveal remarkably consistent emotional themes. I don't recognize my city anymore. This phrase appears again and again. The sense that the place they loved has fundamentally changed into something they no longer understand or feel connected to. I just want peace. Exhaustion. The feeling of being constantly on edge, constantly managing stress, constantly fighting just to get through a normal day. I want space. Not luxury space. Just room to breathe. A backyard. A quiet street. The ability to exist without being surrounded by noise and chaos. I want safety. Not paranoia. Just the basic sense of security that allows you to relax, to let your children play outside, to walk at night without hypervigilance. I want a future for my kids. The realization that the opportunities cities once promised are no longer accessible to the next generation. Here's what's crucial to understand. Many Americans are not moving towards something specific. They're not chasing a dream destination or a perfect new life. They are moving away from something that became unbearable. This emotional push factor, this sense of retreat rather than aspiration, is one of the most powerful forces shaping American migration. And it's almost entirely absent from policy discussions. People who leave cities often describe a sense of failure, even though they know intellectually they made the right choice. They feel like they're giving up on a dream, abandoning a version of themselves they worked hard to become. But they also describe relief. The relief of no longer fighting a system that doesn't work. The relief of being able to afford life again. The relief of silence, space, and stability. This emotional dimension matters because it reveals something essential. This isn't about economic opportunity moving elsewhere, though that's part of it. This is about cities breaking the psychological contract they had with residents. Cities used to promise that if you worked hard, you could build a life there. That promise is broken. And once trust is broken, it's almost impossible to rebuild. What happened to the cities? So how did we get here? How did America's greatest cities, places that defined global culture and innovation for generations, reach a point where millions of people are fleeing? Urban scholars and economists point to four major structural failures that weakened American cities from within. Failure 1, the middle-class exodus spiral. The first people to leave weren't the poor, who often lacked the resources to relocate. And they weren't the wealthy, who can insulate themselves from urban problems with private services and exclusive neighborhoods. The first to leave were the middle class. And when the middle class leaves, cities enter a death spiral that's extraordinarily difficult to reverse. Here's how it works. Middle class departure means tax base decline. Tax base decline means rising budget deficits. Budget deficits force service cuts. Service cuts make the city less livable. That pushes more middle-class families to leave, which shrinks the tax base further. This cycle, known in urban sociology as the spiral of outmigration, has devastated cities before. Detroit, Cleveland, Baltimore, St. Louis. These cities never recovered from middle-class flight in the 1960s and 70s. And now, that same pattern is appearing in cities that seemed immune. San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Chicago. Once the spiral starts, stopping it requires massive intervention. And right now, most cities are watching it happen without a coherent response. Failure 2, the commercial office collapse. The second structural failure is the death of the downtown office. In 2024, office occupancy rates in major cities remain devastatingly low. New York, approximately 50% occupied. San Francisco, 45%. Chicago, 55%. These aren't temporary numbers. They represent a fundamental shift in how work happens. And empty offices create cascading failures throughout urban ecosystems. Empty offices mean empty lunch restaurants. Empty restaurants mean empty transit ridership. Empty transit means declining revenue and service cuts. Empty downtowns feel unsafe, which drives more people away. Cities built entire economies around the office worker. Retail, dining, entertainment, transit, all designed to serve the 9-to-5 crowd. When that crowd disappears, the entire structure collapses. Some cities are trying to convert office buildings into residential housing. But the economics are brutal, the logistics are complex, and the pace is far too slow to prevent widespread downtown decay. Failure 3, the affordable housing paradox. Third, cities failed to build housing that working and middle-class families could actually afford. Developers focused on luxury units because they generate higher returns. Zoning restrictions prevented denser affordable construction. Permitting processes took years. The result? Cities ended up with too many luxury apartments that sit partially empty, and not nearly enough workforce housing that people actually need. So rents skyrocketed for everyone who wasn't wealthy enough to buy. And families who could have stayed, who wanted to stay, were priced out not by choice but by mathematical impossibility. This wasn't an accident. This was a policy failure that prioritized developer profits and wealthy residents over the working families who make cities actually function. Failure 4, infrastructure fatigue. Finally, American cities are simply old and exhausted. Public transit systems built in the early 20th century are breaking down. Water and sewer lines installed generations ago are failing. Roads are crumbling. Bridges are aging past their design life. Maintaining urban infrastructure requires enormous continuous investment. And for decades, cities deferred that maintenance, kicking problems down the road, assuming future tax revenue would cover the bills. But when tax bases shrink and populations decline, that deferred maintenance becomes a crisis. Services decline. Quality of life drops. And more people leave. Cities were built for a world that no longer exists. And adapting them to the 21st century requires resources and political will that most cities simply don't have. Where Americans are going. So if millions are leaving cities, where exactly are they going? The migration patterns reveal a clear preference for specific types of places. Suburbs of major Texas cities. Dallas-Fort Worth. Houston. Austin. These areas offer jobs, affordability, and space, the exact combination cities no longer provide. Florida's West Coast. Tampa. Sarasota. Fort Myers. Rapid growth fueled by retirees, remote workers, and families seeking lower taxes and better weather. The Carolinas, both north and south. Charlotte. Raleigh. Charleston. Greenville. Mid-sized cities with growing job markets and reasonable costs of living. Tennessee, particularly the outskirts of Nashville and the Chattanooga region. Lower costs, no state income tax, and access to natural beauty. Rural Pennsylvania and Ohio suburbs. Reverse migration to areas that were declining for decades but now offer affordability and space that cities can't match. Mountain towns in Idaho and Montana. Despite harsh winters, these areas are attracting remote workers seeking outdoor lifestyles and tight-knit communities. Exurbs outside Phoenix and Las Vegas. Growing rings of development spreading further from urban cores as people seek space and affordability. The pattern is unmistakable. Americans are not rejecting the idea of community or the desire for connection. They're rejecting the modern version of the city that prioritizes density and profit over livability and affordability. They're choosing places where they can afford to own homes, where schools function, where streets feel safe, and where daily life doesn't require constant struggle. This isn't about escaping to rural isolation. Most people are moving to suburbs and smaller cities that offer jobs, services, and community, just at a human scale that feels manageable. The new suburban and small-town revival. And the places receiving these migrants are experiencing transformations of their own. The suburbs are no longer sleepy bedroom communities. Small towns are no longer dying. Remote work combined with urban affordability collapse has created a powerful revival in places that were written off just a decade ago. New residents bring higher incomes, new businesses, and increased demand for schools, restaurants, and services. Property values rise. Tax revenues increase. Infrastructure improves. Towns that struggle to keep their downtowns alive suddenly have wait lists for restaurant reservations. School districts that faced closures are now building new facilities. Housing markets that were stagnant are booming. But this revival is not without friction. Rising rents and home prices that benefit existing homeowners can price out long-term renters and young locals trying to buy their first home. Cultural tension emerges between newcomers with different expectations and long-term residents who resist change. Traffic increases. Schools become crowded. The character of communities changes in ways that create both opportunity and resentment. The American map is being redrawn. Places that were losing population for generations are now gaining. And places that seemed destined to grow forever are shrinking. This redistribution of population represents one of the largest internal migrations in American history. And it's happening largely outside the awareness of national media and political leadership. The future of American cities. So, what happens next? Urban futurists and city planners are grappling with three potential scenarios for the future of American cities. Scenario 1, Reinvention and Adaptation. In this optimistic scenario, some cities successfully reinvent themselves. They build more mixed-use housing that integrates residential, commercial, and recreational space. They make public spaces cleaner, safer, and more welcoming. They invest in better public transit. They reduce crime through evidence-based policing and social services. They deploy technology to make services more efficient. Cities like Miami, Dallas, and Salt Lake City are attempting versions of this reinvention. They're growing, attracting new residents, and adapting to changing expectations. But reinvention requires political will, massive investment, and policy changes that many cities seem unwilling or unable to make. Scenario 2, Permanent Shrinkage and Right-Sizing. In this more pessimistic scenario, some cities never return to their pre-2020 populations. They don't collapse entirely, but they permanently shrink. San Francisco, Portland, Chicago, Seattle. These cities may right-size to smaller, denser cores surrounded by emptier neighborhoods. They'll maintain cultural importance and economic relevance, but they'll be fundamentally smaller places serving fewer people. This has happened before. Rust Belt cities never recovered their industrial-era populations. They adapted to being smaller. The question is whether coastal and Sun Belt cities can make that same psychological adjustment. Scenario 3, The Great Bifurcation. The most likely scenario is neither universal revival nor universal decline, but bifurcation. A splitting of America into two distinct patterns of life. One America centered around a handful of superstar cities. New York, Los Angeles, Miami, Dallas, Houston. Places with enough economic power and global connections to weather the storm and maintain relevance. And another America of suburbs, small cities, and boom regions. Places like Boise, Austin suburbs, the Carolinas, and Tennessee. Places defined by affordability, space, and opportunity for families priced out of traditional power centers. This bifurcated future would mean more than just geography. It would mean different economies, different cultures, different politics, and different visions of what American life should be. The population center of the United States is shifting away from the traditional coastal power cities. And with that shift comes a redistribution of economic and political power that will reshape American life for generations. America is reorganizing. But step back from the details for a moment. What we're witnessing is more than migration statistics and housing markets. This is a national reorganization of American life. Work is changing. The office-centric model that defined 20th-century employment is dying. Families are no longer willing to sacrifice proximity to high-paying jobs if remote work makes location irrelevant. Housing is changing. The assumption that cities offer the best path to prosperity is collapsing. Homeownership, long considered the foundation of middle-class wealth, is being redefined around different geographies. Community is changing. The urban ideal of dense, diverse neighborhoods is being replaced by suburban and small-town networks built around families, schools, and shared values. Education is changing. Parents are prioritizing school quality over urban amenities, reshaping where families choose to live and what they're willing to sacrifice. Politics are changing. As populations redistribute, so does political power. States gaining population gain congressional seats and electoral votes. States losing population lose influence. Dreams are changing. The American dream used to be synonymous with the city. Bright lights. Opportunity. The chance to become someone. Now that dream is being rediscovered in places that offer something cities no longer can: affordability, safety, space, and hope. The silent exodus is not just about people moving. It's about a fundamental renegotiation of what Americans want from life and where they believe they can find it. This is a turning point. And how we respond, whether cities adapt or decline, whether suburbs absorb growth sustainably or collapse under pressure, will determine the shape of American life for the next 50 years. Millions of Americans are leaving cities. Not because they hate urban life. Not because they're giving up on ambition or community or culture. They're leaving because the cities stopped working for them. The American city used to be the engine of the future, the place where hard work turned into prosperity, where immigrants became citizens, where dreams became reality. Now, for too many people, it's become a mirror of a broken system. A place where working harder doesn't lead to stability. Where saving more doesn't lead to ownership. Where sacrifice doesn't lead to reward. The silent exodus is telling us something essential. Americans still believe in the dream. They still want to work hard, build families, create communities, and pass something down to their children. They're just searching for that dream somewhere else. And until cities remember what they're supposed to be, until they rebuild the basic promise that brought people there in the first place, the exodus will continue. Thank you for watching.